these rules, there will be serious consequences. So you hear that statement, then you're told you must follow the law. She basically said you must vote guilty without saying you must vote guilty.
And so let's go ahead and dive right in. This is a case involving a man's Second Amendment rights in New York City.
Dexter is a Renaissance man. He is a unique human being. I would call him a unicorn. He's just an incredible human being. Guy's just brilliant. He's one of those guys that if I went to high school with, I'd be like, nerd, but I was like, secretly, I'd be jealous of him, right?
And this is a case that's being overlooked, but this is a potential landmark case that people need to pay attention to, but nobody's paying attention to it. And I wonder why. We got a lot of eyes and a lot of individuals that are focused on Diddy. And like everybody else, I question the timing of the video because now they're saying it's out of the statutes of limitations as far as this case being prosecuted. So I question it.
Diddy got to take the fall for all that shit. So now, smoke and mirrors, it's the freaky niggas, not the freaky white people. This is all niggas over here. And now, clean up the white shit.
And so meanwhile, there's real cases going on, real cases that are going to be prosecuted that affect all of us. Like this case right here. This is the so-called black man out of New York City who picked up gunsmithing as a hobby during the shutdown back in 2020. And this particular article says that Taylor's fascination with weapons science during the lockdown led him to exploring gunsmithing. However, what started as a personal hobby soon evolved into a legal battle when authorities discovered his lawful acquisition of firearm parts. Keyword, lawful acquisition of firearm parts. And I definitely want to dig a little bit deeper into that. But before I do, I want to go ahead and play a quick clip of his lawyer. This is Mr. Taylor's lawyer talking about some of the challenges that they faced during this case.
From there, he went to Johns Hopkins, bounced around a little bit. He then became an engineer, and he was a data engineer, a software engineer, was working on a number of projects, was doing very well financially. He had enough disposable income, as the DA pointed out during his trial, that in 20 and 21, he spent nearly $40,000 of money to purchase firearms it's legal to purchase these parts. And so he purchased these parts, and in his home, and he has a basement also, in his basement, he wanted to, during COVID lockdowns, thought about starting a new career as a gunsmith. He was fascinated by what's called weapons science, and he was building things for 2 years. He ended up building, I believe it was 8 pistols and 5 rifles, or 6 rifles, AR style rifles, and then 8 or 9 Glock pistols that he built. And as a testament to how good this guy is, they all worked. Now, they established, as one of the elements of a crime is that the DA must establish that the guns were operable. And so they test fired him, even though he himself had never test fired them with actual ammunition.
Wow.
He used what are called live caps.
And so as you can see by listening to Dexter Taylor's lawyer, Dexter is a very brilliant individual. This is somebody that hadn't even tested his own weapons with live ammunition, and they all worked perfectly. This is an individual that was lawfully making his own weapons.
So right from the get-go, and here's the problem that I was concerned about. You had 8 black women on the jury, right? Mm-hmm. 8 black women plus 9 women in total. The 9th woman was a Latina, okay? 2 Jewish guys and a 3rd Latino guy, right? Mm-hmm. So the jury is heavily black women. And you have a black judge. And that's who we ended up with as a jury. And, a lot of them were, they had Caribbean roots. And
so a couple of things we got to unpack on this one right here. Out of all the different people and all the different potential jury members that they could have selected, this is the demographic that they went after. And so that lets you know that not only is the gender divide a real thing, that also lets you know that the ethno divide is a real thing, meaning all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Because not only were the jury Black Caribbean women, the judge that was presiding over this case was a so-called Black Caribbean woman.
And I never said anything about the judge being assigned the case because of optics, right? To neutralize the race issue by having a Black prosecutor and a Black judge. This isn't the first time this has happened to me. Anytime I have a minority defendant, they will throw on a prosecutor who's of that race, to even if but this was interesting. And you have a Black judge, and that's who we ended up with as a jury. And, a lot of them were, they had Caribbean roots, and clearly they identified with her, the judge, right? Because, she clearly showed whose side she was on. Mm-hmm. She was the toughest prosecutor in the room. She was way tougher than these two, guys.
Wow.
Okay, because they weren't over the top.
And so this is another Kyle Rittenhouse situation in reverse. Here we have a so-called Black judge, not only acting as the judge, but also acting as the prosecution, coming straight from the lawyer's mouth. Not only was she acting as the prosecution, but she was even tougher than the prosecution actually was, interrupting him at every turn. And I'm not going to play the full video. I'm going to go ahead and put the full video in a link below in the description, because it's about 2 hours long, and they really go into detail about all the elements and the different trials and tribulations of this particular case. But one of the main things that was brought up about this particular judge is that she said they were not allowed to use the Second Amendment as a defense in her courtroom. She said the Second Amendment does not exist in this courtroom, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the maximum sentence that he can receive is 40 years. And so this is a man that is on trial for his life, and his defense team is unable to use the Second Amendment as a defense tactic in her courtroom. And so that lets you know exactly what you're dealing with. And I'm not sure if y'all remember, I believe it was back in maybe 2020 sometime, where there was a record number of Black female judges that were appointed across the country. Record numbers. And everybody celebrated. Everybody was like, oh yeah, we got some Black judges. Now we can get a fair trial. People that look like us can more than likely get a fair trial.
Very interesting. And my other thing is, I've been doing some digging into the judge and doing some research. I looked where she went to college. The college she went to seems very anti-gun, very much so pro-gun control. I'm like looking at her, where her father came to America to go to Columbia University and to work for the UN. I thought that was very strange. And he met his wife at a UN party. I feel like that's really kind of strange how that works out.
I read that. Yeah. Because I was like, who is this lady? I never, Yeah.
And without going too deep and without getting too heavy, I could give a damn of what somebody looks like, especially when we're talking about judges, lawyers, presidents, and things of that such, politicians in general, I guess. I could give a damn about what they look like. We've all seen what happens when we get a so-called Black man in the Oval Office. We all see what happens. It makes no difference, because it doesn't matter who's in office. What matters is who put them there, who funded them, who financed their campaign, who donated to this and that. And once you find that out, then you'll know exactly what they're going to do once they get in office. Case closed. And so these are the kind of cases that we need to be paying attention to. This man just had a guilty verdict thrown his way, and he's probably going to have about a 4 or 5 year fight to be able to take it to the Supreme Court and to be able to even have the chance to have this overturned. And so these are the kind of things that I'm focused on. These are the kind of things that I worry about. Not to say that the situation with Diddy isn't unfortunate, because I definitely wouldn't want any daughter of mine to wind up in a situation like that, where you have a man needlessly, unwarranted, putting his hands on another female. That's a no-go. And I've had people in my comment section, in my DMs, begging me to respond to Diddy. And just like I told him in the comments, I don't want to waste my time, because this Diddy play is going to probably play for another 2 or 3 months, probably up until election. We're going to see this ran over and over again. You're going to see lawsuit after lawsuit, people coming out of the woodwork, whether it's actually true, whether he actually did more than this, we'll never know. But from here on out, it's he did it. There's not even going to be a question, because the public support that all these alleged victims are going to have is going to be too loud to even care whether or not Diddy's guilty or not. Because he's capable of doing it, because we already saw him on camera doing something, now everything here on out is he did it. And so Diddy's finished, and he's going to get enough airplay on his own without channels like mine and other channels within the so-called black media sphere talking about it. But I think that's going to be a good spot to go ahead and wrap it up. I'm definitely curious to see what y'all think about this particular trial, and maybe some of y'all have some more light to shed on this particular trial as well. But go ahead and put it in the comment section, and as usual, peace and chaos.